You too can become a program sponsor. You'll find details at nwpr.org under Support and Business Support.
A classic summer-like week.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Administrative Committee meeting of the Moscow City Council for Monday, July 25th, 2016. Our first order of business today is approval of the minutes from the July 11th meeting. A motion from Mr. Weber to do so.
I will second that motion.
Okay. Consider that motion to carry since there's only two of you and we both agreed. The second item on the agenda is a request for a beer and wine garden license, and Rod Hall's going to give us the particulars on that.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Hall.
First thing I have for you this afternoon is a request from the sponsors of the August block party, which is set for August 27, 2016. Proprietors of Boosters, Mingles, and McKinney Brothers are promoting this block party. The two of the sponsors are requesting each have a separate beer and wine garden for the event. The city allows the serving and selling of beer and wine in a beer and wine garden on public streets by way of approval of a resolution. The resolution before you is asking that they be allowed to serve and sell alcohol, beer and wine between the hours of 7 p.m. and 11 p.m. August. For the noise ordinance exemption, the music will stop by 10. I'll talk about that in just a minute. They will also be allowed to start setting up their event 1 hour prior to the event, and then setting up and taking down 7 and 11 and 12. In this proposal, each beer and wine garden would be required to have 2 staff checking IDs. The police chief has already did his approval and recommending that only 2 police officers be required for the event. Normally, there's 2 police officers per beer garden. This particular event, he's thinking 2 police officers would be fine. And the noise exemption permit will allow them to have the music going between 5:30 and the watch shop stop at 10 p.m. And so it's before you is the request for approval of this resolution to allow the 2 beer wine gardens for that event.
Yeah, we've gone through this before, especially with boosters, and we've had no problems, I don't think. And that being the case, and with the chief here nodding that he's fine with the situation, one of the captains is here. They're not friends today, if you know what I'm saying. But I think it's fine.
You guys both know that in my day job, I am the executive director of the chamber, and 2 of these businesses, Boosters and Nichols, are indeed chamber members. This is not a chamber-sanctioned event or a chamber-sponsored event, so I think that I can be fair and even about agreeing with you, John, in that I think it's okay to do this.
I'm okay with this too. I just noticed that Keeney Brothers is not listed on the agenda as one of the applicants.
No, the only applicants are the Boosters. There's 2 beer gardens. Boosters is one and Mingles is the other. There's just 3 sponsors for the block party that's already gone through the approval process through the community development.
Yeah, this seems fine with me. They're across the street from each other, kind of kitty corner, and it'd be easy to police for 2 officers. I'm sure one officer can see from one to the other, so I think that's fine.
I do have one thing to add, that how they propose is the 2 beer and wine gardens are actually going to be next to each other, but they will be separated. They will be separate beer and wine gardens. They won't be able to pass alcohol back and forth between each other.
They're separate entities for the purposes of the financial
part.
holding.
Are they sure that tear down will be quiet? It's after the 10 o'clock noise ordinance.
And they're allowed to, if they do it till 11, if they do get too loud, they could be subject to being cited for violating the noise ordinance for the city of Moscow.
Okay.
I think this is a consent agenda item. Jen, put that on there. No one disagrees with that?
No.
No, not at all.
right, the third item on our agenda today is amendment to Moscow City Code Title 9, Chapters 3 and 11, peddlers, solicitors, canvassers, and vendors. Rod's up again on this one.
On this one, I'd invite Captain Lanier to come up, since he was the one that brought this to my attention.
Good afternoon, Captain.
Good afternoon.
This proposed amendment to Moscow City Code Title 9, Chapter 3 and 11 deals with the registration of peddlers, solicitors, and canvassers, and the licensing of vendors. Captain Lanier was reviewing an application for a vendor's license just recently, and he noticed that the categories prohibiting the issuance of a vendor's license was more restrictive than that of the peddlers, registration of the peddlers, solicitors, and canvassers, as well as issuance of a taxi cab license. That seemed a little odd to him, that they'd be more restricted for a vendor than a taxi cab. Basically, the current code prohibits the issuing a vendor's license to anyone who has ever committed a felony or had been convicted of a crime of theft. Most of our codes and most of the codes dealing with you have a prior criminal history, it's usually limits to like within the last 5 years. Because people can change, we believe people can be rehabilitated. Somebody may do something young or something stupid when they're young that they shouldn't be punished for the rest of their life. And so we also have places in our code that if you've got a withheld judgment, you'd be eligible for one of these licenses. Basically, we're proposing replacing the vendor's denial section of our code with that of the peddlers, solicitors, and canvassers, with a minor modification to the peddlers, solicitors, and canvassers denial, so that many of the reasons for denying issuance of a license and even the registration now for the peddlers, solicitors, and canvassers would only go back 5 years. There are some crimes that are probably too great that, a murderer, we don't really probably want them going around and soliciting or vending. There are some crimes that maybe should be prohibited ever getting a license from the city. With these amendments, both the vendor's licensing and the registration of the peddlers, solicitors, and canvassers will read the same for the reasons of denying it. This also helps make Moscow City Code more consistent, fair, and equitable. And then I'll also note that one of the recommendations is that it be recommended that this go forward to City Council for a public hearing.
Yeah.
And Captain Lanier's here if you have any questions.
John.
Captain, you and the police department are fine with this, obviously?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, like Rod said, it's something that I came across as the guy who does the background investigations for people who are applying for these certain types of permits, and it just seemed like different inconsistencies, different levels of burden to issue those licenses. So I brought it up to Rod, and we kind of went through it and tried to come up with some language that makes it consistent across the board for the three license types that we deal with. And yeah, we're very comfortable with the amendment as proposed.
Anything to add, Gina?
No, I think it's great. I think we should go ahead. And Rod, you said this would be put on the regular city council agenda with a public hearing attached.
Yes, this is amending the city ordinance, so the city code that requires a public hearing. Doesn't require a public hearing? Well, then maybe we don't need a public hearing. Okay, then this could be put on the consent agenda if you guys went for.
I think we should
Want to have it,
a regular
public
agenda.
meeting, but it should be on a regular agenda because of ordinance change, so we can discuss it.
Okay.
Okay. And we can do that for next Monday, I assume.
Cool.
All right, then. Item 4 on today's agenda is amendment to Moscow City Council City Code Title 9, Chapter 6 and 7, catering permits.
Again, thank you. Welcome.
Yeah. Welcome once again.
What I have before you, this next item is actually relates to the city clerk, but I will not request that she comes down here since she's already busy working right now. What's before you on this item is a proposed amendment to Moscow City Code Title 9, Chapters 6 and 7, relating to alcohol catering permits. During the 2016 Idaho legislative session, Idaho Code 23-934A was amended, and that is dealing with the issuance of catering permits under state code. They changed the period that allowed for a catering permit to go from 3 days to 5 days. They've enlarged the time for that. So that's what we're proposing, is to amend our code to be more in line with the new changes with state code. This came to my attention. I got a call from one of the attorneys for the Latah County, and they were inquiring about, with the new catering permits being allowed to go to 5 days, would the city be willing to amend our code so Latah County Fair could actually have 4 days? Normally, they've only been held the catering permit there for 3 days for their beer garden. There's also some proposed are some minor changes to clean up our Moscow City code and make it more consistent with the state code. One of the other minor additions is requiring the review and approval of the Moscow Fire Chief. That was one in the 2016 legislative changes. And we need one other change that I noticed today on page 2 of the proposed ordinance. That's page 31 of your packet. Under section 712, it says approval of liquor catering permit. I would strike the liquor and propose that we change it to alcohol to be more consistent with state code and the rest of our code. That was the problem with our code, is that we referred to liquor, and liquor is defined as not beer and wine, but distilled spirits. But the state code talks about alcohol catering permit. So whatever license you have, that's what you can get a catering permit for.
Okay. I see no problem with cleaning up the code and making it consistent with the state. Anybody else have a problem with that? I think this is a regular agenda item as well, since it involves an ordinance, so put that on for next Monday as well. Thank you, Mr. Hall.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
The next item on our agenda is the Area of City Impact Agreement Non-Conforming Uses Amendment Request. And Mr. Belknap is going to fill us in on the details here.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon,
How's
Bill.
everybody doing? No presentation today. So as the committee is likely aware, the Area City Impact is kind of a joint planning area around the city. It ranges from a couple hundred feet from the city limit boundary to maybe just a little under a half mile to the city limit boundary in some areas. Within the Area City Impact, the city and the county jointly participate in land use and development review processes. It's under the county's jurisdiction, but the county has adopted some of the city's code that pertain to mobile home development, RV parks, the land use and subdivision code within the Area City Impact. And the county has the jurisdiction, has the ultimate authority and decision-making authority, but administers those codes in the Area City Impact. Recently, on June 29th, our department received a request from the county Planning and Building Department to consider an amendment to the Area City Impact Agreement to adopt the county's non-conforming uses section of their land use code to apply within the Area City Impact. And the non-conforming uses are those uses that were legally established. They may have been permissible at one point in time, and then the zoning or land use standards changed at a later point, and then they become what we consider to be a legal non-conforming use. That is a use that can continue, but depending upon the circumstances, oftentimes it can't be expanded or they can't be enlarged, or if they're destroyed, they can't be replaced except with a conforming use. How this has come up is there's been a property owner that does have a desire to replace an existing single-family home that's on a property that has more than one single-family home on that parcel. And that is a legal non-conforming use. The current zoning standards only allow one residential structure per parcel. And the county does treat non-conforming uses a little bit differently. Our non-conforming language that the county adopted in the Area City Impact would not allow for the replacement or enlargement of that home. But the county does allow for that continuation, and that's largely reflective of the fact that the county deals with a lot of rural properties where there are farms and homesteads that have been in a family ownership for a number of time, and oftentimes they have multiple generations that reside on that property. And so they encounter this situation much more often than we do in the city in the more urbanized areas. In those instances in the Area City Impact where somebody wishes to replace a home, the really only choice is to try to divide the property to create a separate building lot so that they only have the one residence per lot. And that is really counter to our overall goals and objectives in the Area City Impact. When we begin to see the division of property, especially on parcels of less than 10 acres in size around the city limits, that fragmentation of ownership can really create difficulties for the city to grow in a logical and orderly fashion in the future. So in discussions with the county planning staff, we did feel that maybe the most appropriate solution to these types of situations would be for us to adopt their nonconforming section within the area city impact. There's a number of updates that we're currently working on for the city zoning code, and we are anticipating a complete overhaul to the area city impact agreement once those have been completed. But in the meantime, we do have a property owner in the area city impact that is seeking to replace a home that's too small for their growing family, and they wish to stay on the family property within the area city impact. And so staff felt that it would be appropriate to forward a very minor amendment to the area city impact agreement that would adopt the county's non-conforming sections within the ACI. So staff has, there's a copy of the request that was received by the county. This was presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission on July 13th. They had no concerns or questions and actually recommended approval and supported the proposal. And so they recommend approval to the City Council. And so we have prepared a very minor amendment to the Area City Impact Agreement that would make that change and would apply the county's Section 4.01 within the Area City Impact and would allow for that replacement of residential structures where they exceed the densities that are limited in the zoning code. So we would recommend that be recommended for approval to the City Council, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that the committee may have.
John?
I don't have any questions. It's been fully explained here, and you explained it verbally just now. It seems like the common sense thing to do, and if that whole situation changes for the entire area of city impact, then it changes. But having this brought essentially in line with what the county wants to do and is doing now makes sense to me.
I appreciate your discussion leading up to this, so thank you.
Yeah, I see no reason why anybody would object to this. It's what the county wants. It's what the residents in the area of impact want, and it works out better for the reasonable growth of the city in the future. So I think it's.
Yeah, and it does not create any additional residential structures. It just allows for the replacement of anything existing, and that's so we don't feel that there's any adverse impacts to the city, and only positives for us.
Okay.
Excellent.
I think maybe we should put this on the regular agenda just so all the councilors should have a look at it and understand the concept here. And other than that, it's fine. Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Bill.
And that's all the items we have for today's Administrative Committee meeting. So thank you all for attending and watching on TV. We're adjourned, I guess.